Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Jonathan Bennett joins me. We're going to be talking about Agones, which is a way of hosting your game in the cloud. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned. FLOSS Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Stay in control when it comes to your company's access points and authentication. LastPass makes enterprise-level security simple. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randal Schwartz and Jonathan Bennett. Episode 571, recorded March 25th, 2020. Agones. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center is like no other testing and research lab, with more than $500 million of equipment, including solutions from key partners like HPE and Intel. And it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and become a member of their growing community, go to wwt.com/twit. And by Melissa. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 businesses count on Melissa for clean, reliable data. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free. That's a $75 value at melissa.com/twit. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randal Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you might want to play with right after this show. Today might be one of those. Joining me once again as our probably most frequent co-host these days, Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Randall, it's good to be here. It's kind of the blessing and curse of owning your own business, is setting your own schedule. When something you care about comes up and somebody says, are you available to do this? I can pretty much every week say, yeah, I can fill in if nobody else can do it.
Well, and sadly, I have not only my own schedule these days, I am between gigs. So I'll talk more about that at the end of the show, but definitely looking for more work. So if anybody out there has some work, I would be really happy to have that happen. Today, I don't know how to pronounce this. I should have asked our guest. Agones? Agones doesn't sound right. Agones. Agones? Does that sound close? That's our project for today, and it's about having the ability to put game servers on Kubernetes, so you can scale them and you can use them in the cloud, all sorts of stuff. Cloud's always big words. Sorry, that wasn't much of a transition, was it?
That's all right. I can pick it up. I've been looking at this a little bit, and I think it's also interesting that Mark Mandel, the guest for today, he is a what does it say? He is a developer advocate for games on Google Play or something like that. And so I'm wondering if this game server actually has a lot to do with that, whether it's intended for primarily Android games or, if this is the kind of thing where you can, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but whether you can, roll up your own Call of Duty or Quake 3 game server on the cloud. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to talk to him and find out.
Well, we have a lot of questions to ask our guest. Before we bring the guest on, I do have an important message, because this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT began building their Advanced Technology Center, ATC, 10 years ago, and it's grown exponentially. It's like no other testing and research lab. The lab contains more than $500 million in equipment, wow, from hundreds of OEMs and key partners ranging from high-tech heavyweights like HPE and Intel to disruptors like Equinix. WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need to make sure their business runs right. Their ATC is an incubator for IT innovation and offers schedulable and on-demand labs like the HPE's InfoSite Lab, along with hundreds of other labs, representing the newest advances in cloud-based machine learning to provide global insights into the status and health of infrastructure in one location, and much more. Learn about products before you launch. WWT engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proofs of concept and pilots using the sandbox so customers can confidently select the best solutions. In many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases speed to market. They offer Lab as a Service, a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. It's virtual, so you can take advantage of ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world 24/7. WWT engineers work with these labs every day, beta testing new solutions based on the latest and greatest HPE technologies and building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make decisions and see results faster and with much less investment. WWT has launched their new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. This ecosystem creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for their customers. Get access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and become a member of their growing community, go to wwt.com/twit. WWT simplifies the complex. That's wwt.com/TWIT. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank WWT for their sponsorship of FLOSS Weekly. So let's go ahead and introduce Mark. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Long-time listener. This is a little career moment for me, so I'm pretty excited to be on the show.
Awesome. Glad to have you on this show. And give us a 30,000-foot view. So when would somebody reach for Agones? Or how do you pronounce it? It can't be Agones. That sounds weird.
No, that's a good question. I tell people as long as it has a G and an N in it, I don't care. I say Agones. It's a Greek
Agones.
word. Yeah, I've been told by my Greek friends, and please don't please correct. Like I don't know if that's been true. I have no idea. I'm not a quality, but apparently it should be pronounced Agones with a soft G, which is like a public contest. It was like pre-Olympic type of thing. But if you say it with a hard G, it actually means elbows. But that's fine. Whatever, that's fine. We got it through PR and legal, so it's cool. So yeah. So I work. I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud. I work with a lot of people who build multiplayer games, and often when running multiplayer games, you often use a pattern called dedicated game servers, and we can skip into that. But basically, this is an open source solution for scaling, orchestrating, and running dedicated game servers for large scale multiplayer games. When you want to run dedicated game servers. So think of like games like things like Overwatch, Fortnite, those style of very fast-paced online multiplayer games. This is a solution for infrastructure to help provide multiplayer capabilities, or multiplayer orchestration, I should say, for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's starting to make sense. So
there are a lot of words.
I'm not a game player, so I don't know a lot about all this stuff, but you did say the word Fortnite, which I do recognize. That's probably the only word you said in the entire sequence of words.
Some people play that game.
Yes. I know because I have it on my phone, and I have it. I think we have it on our PS4 here. So that's all I know about it, though. It's basically a game where a bunch of people are all sort of attacking each other. Yep. This is what multiplayer games are about.
So yeah, so it varies from game to game and that kind of thing. So to take an example, right? Like so Fortnite might be a wonderful example because a lot of people know Fortnite. They have this game where you drop 100 people in a single arena, and they all sort of duke it out until one lives at the end. What normally powers something like that, or a very prevalent pattern for doing something like that, and there are a few different patterns, is what we refer to as dedicated game servers. A server being a wonderfully overloaded term, but yet again being used in context. So what we usually refer to then is basically it's a software process which has a full in-memory simulation of everything that's happening inside the game. So usually you host that somewhere on the internet, like on the cloud, something like that. And what happens is generally speaking, all of the players who are playing the game will connect to that dedicated game server. So like you have 100 players playing a game in say Fortnite, they all connect, and it's up to that game server to be like, okay, this player is saying I'm running forward, this player is saying that I'm shooting something, this player is doing this, I've got a bunch of other maybe AI things that are happening, and I then tell all the other clients that are also playing, hey, this is what is going on inside the game. It's basically like your central authority for what's happening inside the game and the mechanism in which you share state out from what's happening inside the game to all the other players as they're connected.
And so what is now I'm trying to remember how you said that Agones. Right. I'm still thinking agony because it's like that's kind of how it's spelled. Yeah, but Agones, how is Agones solving a problem that had previously been a trouble? I mean, it sounds like doing a server is a server. I mean that that's known technology that we don't have to rebuild that. Yeah. So that is actually a really good question. So dedicated game servers are kind of this kind of special breed of like software process because they have this weird thing where they go from stateless to stateful during their whole life cycle. So their orchestration patterns don't really match anything that currently exists. So like a web server, right? Like you run 10 of them behind a load balancer. If one of them goes down, maybe you drop a request, but you could retry. Like it's not such a big deal, right? They're stateless. You could just put in another one. No big deal. The other end of the spectrum, right? You're running databases, a replication thing falls over. Like that's not necessarily great, or a whole database drops out. Like you're like, that's bad. Like we don't want that. With game servers, like I can spin up 100 of them, and usually you will do that. You'll spin up a whole bunch of them because they can take some time to spin up. So you'll have a bunch of them ready, waiting and warm. And before players join a game, you could shut those down and no one would care, which is great, right? So you could, if your player base starts to shrink, maybe as you head towards an evening, you might want to scale them down to capture, to save some resources, for example. But on the flip side, as soon as players connect, you have all this in-memory state in this like single process that you very much do not want it to shut down. Right. So what you need to be able to do in a cost-effective way is basically be able to track, is this process running with players on it or not? And can we scale up and specifically scale down, which is the actual trickier problem, in a way that's cost-effective for either the cloud or on-prem, which has some different patterns too. But make sure that absolutely we do not stop player games that are actively happening, because if you do that, then people go on Reddit and they post nasty things and no one wants that. Sure. So this has got to be a continual problem then, because it's how do you tell whether a player is no longer active, right? Wouldn't that be part of the equation? Yeah. So the way we do it inside Agones is we have a few different mechanisms. Basically, we are what we like to refer to as like an orchestration platform. So we have a bunch of tooling and integration SDKs as well. But essentially what we do is we have a mechanism called what we call allocation. So actually, I'll take a step back even. So within Agones, right, you install Agones on a Kubernetes cluster. It works really nicely. It integrates all the native tooling. It's you use all the same things as you would do inside Kubernetes, which is super nice. And what you're able to do is basically set up these things called fleets, which are these big warm sets of game servers, which we were talking about before, right? You're like, I'd like 100 of these, please, and maybe potentially auto scale it and other fun stuff. One of the ways that you're able to say, hey, I want a game server that I want to determine is like, this is going to have players on it, is we have this thing called allocation, which is basically an API endpoint where you're just like, give me one of these game servers that match these criteria, maybe like one from this fleet. And then we hand it over to you and we actually mark that as allocated. And once it's in that allocated state, then we're like, oh, that means that has players on it. And so we're just going to leave it alone until it like self-marks itself as like, hey, I'm done. So I'm going to shut myself down, or some other explicit deletion process. So we have a lot of stuff in there like that specifically manages that, which a lot of standard Kubernetes is not built for, which is fine. And that's what standard Kubernetes is for. And so we manage that for you. So once you've got that allocated state on that game server, we can do like fleet updates. We can like shrink, we can scale up and down on the game server fleet if we need to as well, like those numbers without worrying about it. And we'll just make sure that gets managed for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. Mark, I want to ask you something. I believe I heard you use the term patent close to the beginning of the show when you were describing this. Is that a software patent in the way that we normally think of them?
Sorry, no, I think that was my Australian accent coming through. I was saying pattern or pattern.
Oh,
if I turn my American accent. Yeah, pattern. I will use my American accent more than my Australian one.
Oh, no, that's fine. If there was a software patent issue here, I wanted to dig into it because it sounded interesting. But that is okay. So next question I want to ask is, as I think about this, as I think about Agones and the different, I guess we could say the different patterns that different games have, I almost have to think that there's maybe not a whole lot of overlap between the way one multiplayer game works and the way another one works. So say, for example, we've got something like a shooter that people are in a lobby and then they get put into a match. The match starts, you go through it, and then the match ends, versus something like an MMORPG that just has a persistent overworld that everybody is in. What is Agones bringing to the table when there's not necessarily a whole lot of overlap between these different game servers?
No, that's a really good question, and I think you actually hit on sort of two very distinct types of games. I would say like right now, Agones is I don't want to say focused actually, is probably optimized more for like what we call a session-based game, which is exactly what you described, where like somebody gets match made, right? A bunch of people get put in a group together to play a game, either through a lobby or some kind of matchmaking process, and then like they play a game and it shuts down, and that works really well. And we handle that flow really well, right? You can do an allocation, they finish the game server says shut down, I'm done, another one spins up, and you can just continue rolling through, and that works super nicely. We're actually actively building a bunch more pieces into Agones to help with the persistent world type problem. Because that usually sits a little differently. Often what you want to actually do is, rather than say like, just give me a whole new game server, you want to say, hey, I've got like 3 players that need somewhere to play on this particular map. So you might be like, okay, now I need to go search through my allocated game servers to find that. So you could still build that kind of functionality on top of Agones. It's super modular and you can really pick and choose. And because you have access to the full Kubernetes API, you can really extend it as you see fit. But we want to build that more native functionality into Agones so that we can handle that sort of persistent world type gameplay in a way that's easier without you having to build extra stuff on top of it. But that is a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Does Agones handle things like lag reduction? Is that something that's built into it, or is that entirely on the developer?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. So yeah, we don't touch communication at all. Basically, you come to us and be like, I want some ports, and we're like, do you want them in TCP or UDP? And you say, this is what we want, and I want a UDP one, and we're like, cool, here you go. So we handle that. We handle the allocation and port mapping for like what ports you need and how to get to those from the IP of the node back to the container itself. But outside of that, it's completely up to the developer. There are so many patterns and so many different codecs that people use for UDP traffic for game servers. We're like, that's not our problem. So just drawing a line in the sand and like where we want to deal with stuff with this project. So we were just like, nope, that's not a problem. We want to deal with the problem of scale, orchestration, hosting. Like that's a hard enough problem as it is.
Okay. So I think I'm beginning to understand the way this works. Would it be fair to say then that Agones kind of sits in the same place that Kubernetes does? It's just it's aimed at this problem of game servers?
Yeah, very, very much so. And it's probably also worth noting like the power of the extensions that Kubernetes gives you through what's called custom resource definitions and controllers and operators, basically a piece of software that can look at Kubernetes resources and react to them, meant that we've been working on this for a couple of years now, but I mean, we had an MVP working in about 3 months. And so like it's really kind of a testament to the power of Kubernetes and the extension mechanisms that it has, that we could start building this thing and really build it out as quickly as we have with the features that we have. It's been really cool, actually.
And then what I assume you have a kind of an idea of what your user base looks like. Are there any big games that you're aware of that you can share with us that actually makes use of Agones?
I can't mention anything too big. The public cases that we have out there right now, actually you can, so I should say, well, let me backtrack. So if you go to agones.dev, we do have a section down below. It says people using Agones. And so we founded this project with Ubisoft. So that's a clear winner there. I'd actually have to look at the website so that I make sure I get this right. Ubisoft is one. Embarq Studios in Sweden is also another one. They've been using it for a while as well. Super solid, I have to mention, because they've been using that since the outset. So they have a game, Snake Wars. It's a mobile game that's doing really well. And Jam City's New World War DOE, which came out it's like a really fresh game. That's also running on it right now. So those are the ones I can mention.
Was there a whole lot of pushback in trying to use open source software in the games industry? There's been history there.
There is. It's been a really interesting ride. I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on open source in the games industry. I would actually say, because I think we sit on the infrastructure side, we didn't get a lot of pushback. We actually got a lot of adoption, because a lot of the groups that I was working with were pretty much either like, we're going to build this ourselves from scratch, or we're like, oh, it's open source, so we can just use that, and then we don't have any vendor lock-in, which is super sweet. So they were super happy about that. So actually, it's been really nice. I'd love to see more open source in the games industry. That's something I'm very passionate about. So the reaction's been quite positive. And I really want to see more open source standards in the games industry.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some, like ID have historically, after they've developed the next generation of engine, they've released the old one, which is, I mean, there's some great projects out there built on that. With the Doom games and everything have now, big portions of those have gone open source, and so you can go and from Fedora, for example, you can go and use just the regular Fedora repos and go grab a kind of an open source reimplementation of the Doom levels and play that. So there's some positive history there as well. I'm kind of curious. You said you had lots of thoughts on open source in the games industry. We can dig into that a bit.
Yeah. Culturally, I feel like there's definite differences between what happens in the games industry software development and like I refer to as like the wider tech community. And this is my perspective as you mentioned earlier, I do developer advocacy, which does mean I talk to a lot of infrastructure teams and a lot of game studios. And it definitely feels like in the wider tech community that I think a lot of us belong to, it's sort of the question of like, oh, if I need to do X, then I'm going to like, there's usually 5 different options for some kind of foundational piece of software, right? Like I'm looking for a database or a programming language right? Like that's all very normal. I feel like the wider tech community is kind of socialist in its views. Like we're all like rising tide lifts all boats and like all that kind of stuff. Like, which I think is great. And I feel like the games industry is probably a little bit more like capitalist in its views. It's like, what have you done for me lately? And like, and there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of, I don't, whether it's justified or not, and that's an interesting question, but like, what we build in house is our, like our core competency and what makes us different and that kind of stuff. And what I've actually been starting to see some shift in that of like, okay, the foundational stuff isn't necessarily, that's not what your core competency is. Like the game that you make is your core competency. And when I think on the infrastructure side, that's probably actually a really nice opening area for open source in the games industry, just because the infrastructure tends to be so open source. Things like Kubernetes, things like Istio, things like gRPC, things like, there's a wide variety of projects, like Terraform, like just pick so many things, right? And so they're very used to that. But at the same time, we're seeing things like the Godot engine is improving by leaps and bounds, which is super awesome, which is a fully open source engine you can use. There's a bunch of game stuff happening in the Rust ecosystem that's super exciting. We mentioned Embarq Studios, which is a studio I have a bunch of friends at. They're pushing a bunch of stuff in the games industry as well. IGDA, which is the International Game Developers Association, has a special interest group for open source that I've been poking at for a while as well. So there's definitely some movement there, but it is hard to work out like how to get open source adopted, and vice versa to get like big studios and teams to either promote or start to create open source as well, and understanding what that workflow looks like and the costs and benefits, is kind of interesting and challenging. And the legal, often it's a legal issue more than anything else, like running into lawyers.
Yes. Too bad we can't physically run into lawyers. We might solve some problems. I'm intrigued by this because I'm thinking about it now, and of course my mind goes back to one of the original essays that kicked off a lot of how we think about open source, and the cathedral and the bazaar. And you kind of think about the classical game development model is very much the cathedral. You've got a developer that sits on a game and they want to get it perfect. They want to get everything about that experience ready to go, and they don't want to let any of the story leak. They want to be very much in control of the screenshots and the video gameplay that leaks, and they get it done, and then they give it to the community, or they sell it. Obviously, they don't give it away, but still, in a way, they give that experience to the community, and they say, "Here, it's ready. Try it." And then you've now got kind of this huge revolution in indie games, where you've got a guy in his garage. Once again, kind of we've come full circle. A guy in his garage that says, "I've got this cool idea here. I've barely got the tech demo together." Puts it out on the internet. Hey guys, check this out. Which, one of the biggest games of our time, Minecraft. That's how it started.
Yeah.
You had Marcus Pearson Passion, however he says his last name, Notch. Hey, this is a really cool idea. Here's a tech demo. Everybody try it. It's for free. And then, eventually they started charging for it. And I wonder, is there kind of a corresponding difference in attitude towards open source in these two very different groups of developers, of game developers?
That's interesting. I'd actually that's a good question. I actually don't know if there is a difference. I think the big difference I'm seeing is more about development cycle in games. So I think for both groups, I think you're 100% right. There's that early access and that kind of role that has definitely changed some of that landscape. But a lot of that time, it's still like a group of people or a singular person starts a game, and they're working on that game for 2-3 years or a year or whatever, an extended period of time. And that's the classic game development model, right? I start making a game. I'm probably making technical decisions in the beginning, and I'm just going to stick with them all the way through until I release the game. Here's my game, and then I'm going to start a new game next. And I might take the old code base and just add new stuff to it so I can make my new game. But there's no really long-term maintenance per se in the way that many of us who run websites that are up 24/7 and are up for years, right? That sort of thing doesn't necessarily exist. So in some ways, having those foundational pieces that are reusable have a little less benefit, or at least maybe don't seem worth the investment per se. But the change that I'm seeing in the games industry is what we often refer to now as games as a service. So you're seeing games we talked about Fortnite before that have been running, and they run seasons, and they have in-game events. And so it's no longer I buy a game off a shelf and I take it home and I play it and I'm cool and I'm done. It's I take a game and I start playing it, and suddenly there's a new loot drop or there's a whole new content pack. Every 2 weeks I'm getting new storylines and all this stuff. So now we have this ongoing maintenance of these games over months, years. I mean, League of Legends has been running for how long? So now that maintenance factor becomes a really big thing. And I think that's where we start to see where people are okay, maybe we need to start building open source things because, we want the help from the community so we don't have to build it ourselves, or we just want a base that we can hire from, or all those other really good open source reasons.
Well, I can't let Jonathan have all the fun. And especially because we have an important message before we continue with the show, which is that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by the leader in address verification, Melissa. Every address is covered from Adelaide, Australia to Zipacada, Colombia, and everywhere in between. We all know there's nothing good about bad data. It costs money, hurts sales, and decreases customer satisfaction. If bad addresses, duplicate records, and bouncing emails are hurting your business, isn't it time to come clean with Melissa? Delta Faucet, Z1 Motorsports, and Car2Go use Melissa. You should too. Delta Faucet was able to improve their call center processes with global address auto-completion. Melissa was able to reduce the fraudulent e-commerce transactions for Z1 Motorsports by 90%. Melissa provides a full spectrum of data quality protection for your customer data. Verify postal addresses, mobile numbers, and email addresses. Update the addresses of customers that have moved and eliminate duplicate records. Gain additional customer insight into your data with Melissa's analytics. Easily build address verification and customer data validation into your custom application using Melissa's APIs, CRM cloud connectors, and e-commerce plugins, or upload your customer file for a quick data cleanse. Melissa is serious about securely managing your data. They continually undergo independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Mailers spend about $20 billion annually in undeliverable mail. Don't lose customers or cash. Make every address count. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 organizations worldwide trust Melissa to get their customer data clean and accurate. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free. That's a $75 value at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/TWIT, or call 1-800-MELISSA to find out more. And we appreciate Melissa for their support of Floss Weekly. And Mark, one of the things for those who are watching the video is you got this very cool podcast set up. Are you? Have you done podcasting before?
Yeah, I have done podcasting before. So I started with another coworker of mine, Francis Campoy. We started the Google Cloud podcast, which I actually don't work on anymore, but it's been running for probably coming up to 5 years now. So that's been going every week, every Wednesday for 4 or 5 years, where we talk about all kinds of cloud stuff, from open source to game stuff to machine learning and all kinds of other good things. So yeah, I've been podcasting for a while as well.
And for those who aren't familiar with Google Cloud, you might as well give them a plug.
my glorious employers. Yes, I work for Google Cloud. We are a public cloud company based out of Google. We have a wide variety of stuff. So I primarily work on the gaming tool set that we have. Like I work on Agones, obviously, because I'm here. And right. I work on the, we also have literally just released our Google Cloud Game Servers, which is our managed layer on top of Agones. But if you're looking for a cloud provider, check us out. We're cool.
And by cloud provider, you're talking about something that's probably similar, for those of us who are familiar with it, to AWS?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so you want databases, you want VMs, you want Kubernetes, you want serverless solutions, machine learning solutions. I'm probably missing stuff. Our product catalog keeps growing, and I can't keep up.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. I'm a GDE, so I do pay attention to this stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yes. I got that blessing about a year ago. I'm a GDE mostly for Dart and Flutter. So
very cool.
And Dart and Flutter are pretty ingrained now in Google Cloud. So you can actually run applications like that, which is pretty cool. So how did this get started? What triggered the existence of this project?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I'm trying to think of where to start the story. So probably I'll start the story at the fact that, like, before I joined Google, I was not a game developer. I dabbled a little. My theory coming out of university was I wanted to get into game development, but I was living in Melbourne, Australia, and there were 2 AAA studios, and then there was 1 AAA studio. This was like the late 90s, and my friends, they were like, "It's great, you work 80-hour days and or 80-hour weeks, and like it's fantastic." I was like, "No, I'm not doing that." But I joined Google and saw there was a bit of a gap in what we were doing in Google Cloud for games, and I wanted to help fill that. But I had all this knowledge from like doing DevOps type stuff and infrastructure stuff and Kubernetes stuff and open source stuff. And I definitely wasn't the only one having the idea of game servers on top of Kubernetes, but I was definitely meeting with a lot of game companies that were looking to run this type of workload, this dedicated game server workload. And I was like, I know about Kubernetes, I know about open source. I know we do that really well at Google Cloud. I'm like, cool. Wonder if we can run game servers on here. So I spent a bunch of time doing some research. I published some articles about this on my blog and like on Gamma Sutra, which is a fairly well-known games publication. Pushed out some open source stuff and spoke at some conferences. And it resonated with a lot of people. And I was seeing other people also, and some other people I knew at game companies trying to test out similar things running game servers on Kubernetes. So I knew it was a pretty good idea. And essentially having a conversation with Ubisoft, and they were like, "We should build this together." And I was like, "Sweet, let's do it." Went to my bosses, obviously, and they were like, "Cool, absolutely, let's do it." And so then we started the project. So it was really just sort of finding a gap in the industry and realizing like that these kind of foundational solutions would be really useful and really well received. So we just dove in and started building, and it's been a fun, wild ride.
Well, how did people solve this problem before?
That's actually a really good question. So there's depending on where you work and what you do, essentially there's a bunch of proprietary solutions out there. So a lot of big game companies just build this themselves. Very, very common. By the same token, there are other companies out there that provide this as a service. Multiplay, who's a partner of Google Cloud, so I can mention that. And like GameLift is one of our competitors as well. So there's other things out there that do this in a proprietary way. But generally speaking, honestly, a lot of people really build this themselves in a lot of cases, which I don't think is great because everyone has to reinvent the wheel, which kind of frustrates and upsets me. That's something that always bugs me when I see people doing the same thing over and over again. And I usually just want to jump in and be like, okay, I'm just going to build an open source thing because it's ridiculous. We're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, but that's as I just got whispered in my ear. That's the non-invented here syndrome, which is true everywhere, right?
Yes,
it's like I didn't build this, so therefore I should build my own that makes it exactly the way I want it to be. Yeah. There are definitely some pluses to that, which is that it offers an opportunity to precisely customize it the way you want. Yeah. But that also means you're wasting probably a lot of duplicated effort.
No, I 100% agree, and I think I find it really interesting that I run into this sometimes where, I mean, we went 1.0 back in September. So we're like, you're good for production workloads, like that's all fine. But even before that, people would come to us and be like, yeah, so this software is still alpha, so I'm not going to use it, even though it has a whole bunch of functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go build my own thing from scratch. And I sort of stand back and I'm like, you do realize that the code you're writing that hasn't run in production is also alpha? Yeah. So, I mean, choice, that's fine. There are pros and cons. I understand if we're not a fit, that's great. But people have a lot of confidence in stuff that they wrote themselves. And I think there's probably some psychological reasons for that. And I'm sure we've all done that, which I find really interesting. Whereas, but I mean, now we don't have that issue. Now we've gone 1.0. So people are like, oh, it's fine. So it's cool.
I don't notice much of an Australian accent for you. Have you been in the States for quite a while?
I've been here about 5 years. I did live in Atlanta, Georgia for a number of years when I was younger. And I used to come over here and present at conferences and stuff. So I can say my name's Mark from Australia, or I can say my name's Mark from Australia. Nice.
And what part of Australia?
Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne. I love that place. Yeah. I love that place. Yeah, I've been there a couple times. I have some friends that teach at the uni there. So I've been to Australia 7 or 8 times, but they won't let me go back. So apparently they've reached their quota of felons. So I guess I'm pretty much screwed.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
No. I mean, it's funny because the last couple times I went, there was some issue about me even getting through the gates at IMI, and I even got detained for an hour and a half on my way out, which was really scary. Good thing I got to the airport early. So, but there's only two countries in the world that I can't go to anymore, and that's Canada and Australia. So it's like I've been to 62 countries, but I can't go to either of those anymore. Well, So this is an ongoing project. What's in the future? What's going to change in it?
That's a good question. I think so. We're looking. We literally actually just did a survey that closed out to our community about the sort of features they're looking for. We're starting to look more at some more advanced sort of orchestration patterns that we can provide for our users. And we were talking about previously how we can support persistent worlds better. So we've started working on some stuff for that around like actually tracking the number of players that are connected at any given point in time, which then leads us into being able to do things like, hey, give me a game server that has like 10 players, like that has room for 10 players on it. Being able to like auto scale based on player count. So like, make sure there's always room for 100 players to always join at any given point in time. as well as doing some other fun things. So like one thing I'm particularly excited about, and we've had a lot of requests for, is what fits really nicely into the Kubernetes model is like you have a singular game server with a singular session running in a single container. Like somebody comes in and they play a game, and then that container dies and says like, I'm done, and disappears. Because like game servers tend to be really big processes. And so like, I mean, we have images that'll go to 3 GB in size, potentially lots and lots of stuff in memory from like in-game assets and physics simulation and all kinds of fun stuff. Often what people want to do is run multiple game sessions per game server and sort of collate that together into a single container and have that live for a lot longer. So we're looking as well at how we can do that and support that in Agones as well, so people can get even more densely packed usage of like their resources in that way as well. So we have lots of fun stuff in the pipeline for sure, and everything's up on GitHub, so you can actually see all the tickets and all the feature requests and all the design tickets we already have available up there as well.
Hey, Mark, I want to know, is Agones an official Google project, or is this just something that they let you work on?
No, this is an official Google project. If you go to any of the game solution stuff for Google Cloud, you'll see Agones listed there. We literally just released a managed product on top of the Agones open source project. So this is something that is actively being worked on and definitely part of our overall strategy.
Very cool. What license is it under?
Apache 2.
Okay. With it being with it running simply in the cloud and none of the software running on actual end customer computers, like gamers don't run this on their hardware.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting wrinkle for open source. It in a way it defeats some of the open source solutions. Did you guys think about doing anything like the AGPL? Or I guess Google won't touch the AGPL, will they?
I won't speak to what Google will do around licensing. I think that's definitely something that would get me in trouble with lawyers. So I will say Apache is a great license and I like it.
That is a great answer, sir.
But I think like Agones is built to run on like standard open source Kubernetes. Like there's nothing special that way. And because we want to support game players where they are, like we actively want you to be able to run Agones whether on Google Cloud or any other cloud or on-prem or on your own like machines inside your dev center, like wherever it is that you need to. So that's definitely a huge priority for us.
Sure. So is there an API that if somebody's building the game from the ground up, that they can kind of build their game server around, so that Agones and the individual processes can talk to each other transparently?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and I think there's kind of two sides to that. So on the game server process side, we have a bunch of integration SDKs, so that you can get like, what's my configuration information, like declare that a game server is ready, like you've loaded all your assets and you're good to go, doing some health checking and some other really useful tools. We provide that as some pre-built SDKs for like Unity and Unreal and like C# and Go and a bunch of other languages. That's also backed by a gRPC and REST endpoints internally, so you can actually even build your own if we aren't supporting you or don't provide one that you like. So there's that on the internal side. And then if you wanted to like externally talk to Agones, the entire system, like game servers, fleets, allocations, that kind of stuff, what's really cool is that the way Kubernetes extension works is once you plug in those extensions, they actually extend the Kubernetes API itself. So if you have access to the Kubernetes API, you're able to say, hey, Kubernetes, like create me a game server or access a fleet or, like let me see events that are happening inside the system in the same way that I would with regular Kubernetes. So you can build really anything you want for like customization or interception of events or other cool stuff like that.
So is this something that's fairly approachable? If someone has an existing system set up and they're looking to modernize it, they could kind of shoehorn an existing game ecosystem into this?
Yeah, I think so. We try not to be opinionated in terms of like how this works too much, and try and out of people's way a bunch. So like, for example, I mentioned that whole allocation system. So we kind of have two different ways of doing that. One of which is like we have an endpoint that you can hit and you'd be like, hey, give me a game server, and like we allocate out. By the same token, if there's a lot of systems that say game servers, actually, let me take a step back. Often a matchmaker will either like reach out to something like an allocator and be like, hey, I have players that want to play a game, so give me a game server, and like trust the system to do what it needs to do. Other matchmakers will be like, every single game server needs to register with me, And then I'm going to go tell the game server, hey, like you should have players on you now, which doesn't work with that pattern. So we also supply an allocate endpoint in the SDK so that if game servers need to register with a matchmaker, follow that kind of pattern, you're able to do so. We don't like that as much because it's a little harder we can't do the cost saving type optimizations that we would do normally, but that's a choice and we let you do that. So like, we try and stay hands off in that way. So yeah, I think this is something that you can start to feed into your current process and current setup if you want to do so.
And then there's something we've kind of seen in the games world in just the last few years. I think maybe Minecraft is really what kicked this off. That's like third-party providers selling kind of a service of doing, we'll let you. We don't have anything to do with, now it's Microsoft. We're not affiliated with Microsoft. Yeah. But we'll be glad to rent out to you servers so that you can run your own Minecraft instance. So just as an example, but these guys don't have, they don't have source for the server that they're running. And so I'm just curious, could somebody use Agones without access to the source code of, the back end of whatever game that they're wanting to host?
Yeah, that's a super, super cool question as well. So we actually do this in a couple of places. There's a couple of open source games, Sonotic, and which is like an FPS, Super Tux Kart, which is a Linux flavored like Mario Kart clone, which is super cute. And so what we actually do there is we just write little wrappers that look at the log files to do the SDK integration. So usually like there's something in the log that's like listening on port 8080, and you're like, oh cool, if it's doing that, then I know it's ready. So I'll just look at the log file or forward it through my wrapper, and then I can push that out. I will not claim credit for that approach. I've definitely seen that on the internet, and I'm totally blanking. Brian Peake, actually from Microsoft, I think was the person who I stole that from. And I was like, that is a genius idea. And so totally stole that approach. And so, yeah, there's definitely ways you can do that. There's a variety of patterns I've seen that people integrating Agones, and that's just one of them as well.
And then Mark, last question for me, kind of a follow up to that. What is the weirdest or coolest thing that you've seen somebody use Agones for?
That is a great question, and as a podcast host, is one that I've asked frequently myself, and I love that. And I'm also just thinking, like, oh God, now what do I want to like? What is my answer to that question? The weirdest thing. I actually can't think of. Oh no, hold on. I think the weirdest thing I've seen. Yeah,
there's this second layer you got to think about. It's like, am I allowed to talk about this example?
Yeah, this person mentioned it in Slack, so I think we're fine. I won't say who it was though, but someone was doing a system based on Agones, and we actually have another open source matchmaking framework called OpenMatch, and they were using both to set up it was like a sports, like a real life sports matchmaking and coordination system. And I'm trying to work out what they were using Agones for, and I'm trying to think if it was like virtual exercise or something. But we've definitely had some of that weird and interesting like real life blending of game stuff with our system, and like trying to set up like servers that do relays of like people doing stuff in VR and like that kind of thing. It's that was not the best answer, but it was some stuff that way.
So we're almost out of time. I have a couple more things I want to talk about. I can't let Jonathan have all the fun. So I have a couple more things to talk about. One is that when will you incorporate blockchain?
I'll get on that straight away for you, Randal. Absolutely.
And also, I do want to share one more experience since you're an Australian. My first time to Tasmania, Hobart, I was teaching a class, and some guy asked a question, and I couldn't cut through his accent because the Tasmanian extremely strong accent. And I asked one of the other coworkers or one of the other co-students, I said, "What did he say?" And she goes, "We don't know. He's Taz." So that was fun. That was fun. Neither of us understood what he was saying at all. So I got two more final questions I have to ask. Well, three questions, actually. One is there anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure is covered before we have to let you go?
If you want to get started with Agones, go to agones.dev. We have quick starts to get going, and that's wonderful. I've mentioned it a couple of times. We did build a management layer on top of this, so I'll plug that very briefly. If you want to run multiple clusters around the world, the management layer is a wonderful step into that, an orchestration layer for that. But we don't lock you in. So if you want to go from open source to managed back to open source, we definitely love you to do that. So you can check out the quick starts for that. They're up now. We would also love contributors as well. We have a Slack, GitHub, mailing list. If you want to get involved, please come down. We run regular community meetings as well once a month. So we definitely love people to come and swing by, talk about what they're trying to build, talk about what they want to build. We definitely love to have you and get involved. We have a really nice community of people working together. So we're super happy about that.
Have you had a lot of outside contributions?
Yeah, I think we're sitting somewhere about 50 or 60 external contributors.
Nice.
I mean, it's like any open source project. Oh, we're up at 70. Look at that. We had a lot of people who drive by, drop off stuff, and continue on going. We probably have a core set of somewhere between 5 at the moment, 5 and 10 people who are consistently like from outside, but it varies. So it's been really well received, and super happy about it.
Nice. So it's not just Google contributing to this.
Yeah, we've nice. Definitely got a lot of outside contributing, and we couldn't honestly. I would say like we couldn't have built it without the game studios coming in and providing that knowledge and that feedback. It's just the wonderful thing about open source is getting that diversity of background.
Great, and I think I know the answer to this next one, but we'll give it a try anyway. What's your favorite scripting language?
Ooh. I should have expected this. I'm a long-time listener. If I'm writing scripting languages, I probably fall back to Bash more often than not if I'm just doing a quick script. But I do most of my coding in Go and a little bit in Rust these days.
Yeah. Okay, so but none of the ones that I was looking for. But okay, that's fine. That's fine. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Oh man, I needed more sleep before I did this show. But that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Anyway, let's talk about your favorite text editor.
Favorite text editor? I do everything in IntelliJ. That's my go-to. I know it's an IDE, but yeah, that's been my mainstay for just about every single programming language I have ever touched in my life. I love that thing.
IntelliJ is fine. It's a wonderful editor. I think it's too slow for me. I'm much happier with VS Code now these days, and just because it's much quicker, much faster. Hey, Mark, it's been wonderful having you on talking about this project. I hope to bring you back on in 18 months or so and see how this has progressed. That would be great.
Love that.
So feel free to re-invite yourself back on the show, but. Like I said, Mark, it's good to have. Oh, did we ask you where you're calling in from?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Okay, let me wave in that general direction. All right. Okay, up that way. All right, because it's north of me, and that north is generally over that way for me. Okay, since I'm in Tijuana, that's south that way, and this is north. Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll be happy to have you back on when there's more to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. That was Mark Mandel talking to us about the Agony Project. No, Agones Project. The Agony Project. What do you think there, Jonathan?
So whenever you go to name your open source project, many of us are bad about this. At least spend a moment and think, how are people likely to pronounce this? And then ask yourself, am I okay with people pronouncing it that way?
Right.
It sounds like Mark is totally okay with us mispronouncing it as Agonies, which is good because that's what it looks like.
It does seem to be that way.
But that's okay. It's a cool project. It's really neat. It actually makes a lot of sense for Google because it's something that they can open source and put out there, and at the same time, it's kind of a way for them to gather people up into their ecosystem. But at the same time,
helps promote people in Kubernetes too, which is their project.
Right. It's cool though, because it sounds like it doesn't lock somebody into the Google infrastructure, which is something that, some people kind of abuse open source to try to do that. And it's great to see a project where that's not the case. But it sounds like it really takes this problem that's pretty common for, I would think, more than just developing games, but specifically for game developers, and really gives them a set of tools to solve it. I thought it was cool that they have a way, or at least some people that make use of this, where, rather than building around it, you can just scrape the logs and do whatever you need to based on what the logs are saying. I just think that's neat, and that's a clever way to go about it. And there, towards the end of the interview, after I was done asking questions, it finally occurred to me, I've got this little side project that I'm working on that would actually be a good fit for this potentially. So I'll have to make a mental note and swing back around eventually and see if I can make that work.
Yeah, you sound like me, though, at the end of every show, which is like, oh, my God, I want to go play with this. And then the following week shows up, and I'm kind of screwed because it's like,
something else that's interesting.
Something else is interesting, right? Exactly. Like, I'm sure next week's is going to be like that. Anyway, actually, next week's probably won't apply much to me, which is crazy. We're going to have F-Droid on next week, which is a installable catalog of free and open source software applications for the Android platform. But I don't have an Android phone, so I have a iPhone. Much to the dismay of all of my friends who said, well, you should be running an Android. And it's like, no, I kind of want my iPhone to be connected to my Mac laptop and all that other stuff. So, no, I'm not running Linux anywhere. So, oh boy, I'm going to get hate mail for that. Then following that, Hydra, a framework for elegantly configuring complex applications. And then following that is PIMCore, which creates frictionless, personalized customer experiences on top of your master data across all channels and touch points in real time. That sounds like a great show for buzzword bingo. So be ready with your card when you have that, because I have a feeling that's going to be good. I'm going to hopefully get Simon on that one, because Simon's really good at buzzing through buzzword stuff. XCPNG, which is a turnkey open source hypervisor. So that sounds like fun. Contractor is a builder of anything and is targeted to use a generic API to create, destroy, and manipulate your resources, no matter where they are. NetData has been rescheduled to be back on the show, and I didn't copy my notes for that. Oh, well, it's NetData. It's like gross data minus the overhead, I guess. Okay. Anyway, twit.tv/floss is the homepage for this show. If you have any other suggestions, please tell the project leader or the community coordinator to email me. We have a live stream that we take questions from. Only a couple questions today. That's at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays. We're back to Wednesdays again. Yes, we were Friday last week, but we're back to Wednesday, live.twit.tv. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Twitter. You can follow me at Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N on Twitter. But more importantly, you can communicate with us, and we will respond at the forum at twit.community. And there is a special thread there just for Floss Weekly. So that's going to be fun. My biggest plug these days right now is I am between gigs. I am seriously looking for more work, hurting badly. So if you want to hire me for Perl work, remote work, that would be very, very cool. Jonathan, anything you want to plug?
I'll just mention that you can follow me at JP_Bennett on Twitter. Feed me show ideas, feed me security news. And then every Friday over at hackaday.com, check out the security column where I take the news from the week and break it down and let you know what's going on.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, once again, I appreciate you stepping in as being available to be the co-host for this show. And I almost slept my way through this show, so we'll see. I'm probably going to go take a nap right after this, right after I do my opens. But I'm definitely lagging today. Anyway, great, thanks, and we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.